to another edition of the CBB Super Show, brought to you by the FTN Network. I'm your host, Walter Waddell, a.k.a. Dub Deuces 85, that niche sports connoisseur y'all know and love. Out here entering the month of February. Yes, indeed. Depending where you are in the country right now, it is officially February 1st. Put this month of January behind us. That transition from non-con to conference play, we find out who's a non-con hero. We find out who's the real deal. We have a pretty damn good idea about everything in the landscape at this point, but damn, that variance, sometimes it's good to us, sometimes it's not. We're out here. We're doing our thing. I'm extremely excited to enter the month of February. We're in the home stretch here. Before you know, it's going to be Selection Sunday. These games are going to start going by extremely fast. But as we turn the page here into the new month, I am optimistic and feeling very good. A lot going on this weekend. It's huge. Obviously, the week before Super Bowl, so there's not a lot going on outside of basketball and a few other things. Lots of opportunities here for some new folks to check out what college basketball is all about. We've been getting new viewers, new members, new community subs each and every week. It's been awesome to see as we expand out our offerings. FTN has pretty much everything that you could possibly need. MLB is right around the corner, all of the pre-draft stuff going on there. Obviously have wall-to-wall Super Bowl coverage. We have daily NBA coverage. We're doing our thing here for college basketball. Just released some college football stuff, rankings, futures for next year, who we think might be, in the playoff picture already, transfer, NIL, all that stuff. So much to do. Articles, projections, optimizers, live shows, Discord shows, everything you need to be competitive. And what we like to do here on the Super Show, of course, is find those green screens as it pertains to DFS and walk those window trips when it pertains to the betting stuff. Green screens and window trips. That's what we're all about here. Before we get started, and when I talk about what we're doing this weekend, please make sure if you're watching on YouTube or over on Twitter/X that you do help us out smashing that like button. All of those interactions, questions, comments, concerns, likes, shares, reposts, retweets, and everything in between are extremely beneficial and helpful, not only for me and my show, but the FTN network as a whole. Helps us a tremendous amount. And, if you want to see the Super Show continue on as it has for the past decade, that's all I ask, is a little bit of interactions from you guys or likes. It really does help. Those for the new to the show, what we do here is we go game by game, covering the DFS slate, typically from a DraftKings perspective. So we have 10-game main slate that we're going to primarily focus this breakdown on. Not a lot of coverage these days on FanDuel, although we still talk about it. We do cover it in Discord. And we do have projections for both DraftKings and FanDuel that we work with. Also refining the prop betting stuff down and prop projections. So there's all kinds of things happening as I work on those. We have a ton of data now, DVP information, everything. And it's becoming a very good situation where the R-squared is getting very accurate. And we're absolutely crushing. And lately, the Saturday night slates have been extremely beneficial for us, especially people miss news and don't roster certain players, or there's all kinds of craziness that happens on those secondary slates. So those have been our specialty of late, but we're going to focus primarily on this 10-gamer. Going to go game by game. In the background, there will be the projection screen up, so you can kind of see who we like initially. DVP stuff and the filters are on. There'll be some manual editing that transpires this evening and into the morning. But for the most part, you'll see who we like, who our system likes. At the end, we'll give a 3-man core that we're going to be building primarily single entry main lineups around, but a core group of players that we like and are going to have a lot of. We'll also talk any prize picks or underdogs, if there's anything that is advantageous that we can attack, and any betting opportunities as well. Appreciate you guys very much. Let's get into it here. Let's dive in. We're going to start with this first game on deck. Florida versus Tennessee, an SEC battle. The SEC teams, man, they are continually beating each other up. We know it. It's been crazy. Tennessee has a 4-point advantage here. per DraftKings, a total of 143.5. The Gators, man, don't mess with the Gators. They look absolutely phenomenal. They have some great wins, and they look like a team capable of making a Final Four run. Tennessee, they're in a tailspin a little bit. They've gotten their doors blown off. They've lost a close one to There we go. We're out here. All right. So that'll be in the background there. Starting off with the Tennessee side, there are some injury designations here. Zakai Zeigler with an official questionable designation. He's dealing with a knee injury. I highly doubt he's going to miss this game. He did leave early in the game against Kentucky, came back out to play. He didn't practice yesterday. That's kind of a precautionary thing. It would be a real big surprise if he didn't go here. A tough matchup here. They're at home at least. If they were on the road here, I'd feel very, very uncomfortable with Tennessee. As it is, I do like Florida to possibly win this game, but definitely cover. But I don't expect Zakai Zeigler to miss any time here. We'll see. Igor Milicic also had a early week designation of questionable. It doesn't sound like he's going to miss, though. There is the norovirus illnesses and all that stuff going around. So we're seeing guys pop up with, these game day flus that they're missing time. And there's a lot of, I should say, a lack of clarity when it comes to these injuries and sicknesses and all that. But I do expect Igor to play as well. They're already pretty short-handed as it is for the most part. Their bench has been kind of struggling, so they can't afford to be missing two of their best players. Might we see a bit more from Darlington Dubar, potentially, who did play 18 minutes in that game against Kentucky because Zeigler had to leave for part of it? He looked a lot like the Hofstra version of himself that we've got to know and love over the last few years, scoring 7 points, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, a block, and an assist. Priced at 3-2. God forbid if Zakai Zeigler did have to miss this game or he was limited in any form or fashion at 3.2K, he would be an extremely interesting play. You can see you only have him slotted in for 5 minutes there. But when you start getting into the 18 to 20 minute range, things become very exciting for a player who's nearly min price. He pops up there over 4X. Would be a lot unlikely, but we'll see if that happens, honestly. Overall, Florida, they have been extremely good defensively. They have a lot of athleticism. The ball spot was very advantageous against Kentucky. We know they play a fast tempo. They're very fantasy friendly. Didn't work out all that well. Chaz Lanier didn't play very good. Igor Milicic did have a pretty damn big game against Kentucky, but you'll see the projections here initially on Tennessee. Not all that great here. Zakai Zeigler has been a very safe option, but he's priced up at almost 9K. His shot, it's just not pretty. It doesn't fall that often. He does have a safe floor because of his elite peripherals, but we're talking about a knee injury here that's at least going to have him less than 100%, right? He's going to play, I'm sure of it, but he won't be the 100% version of himself. And he'll be facing against a Florida team that, will not yield even an inch. On the Florida side, very, very good-looking team here. Elijah Martin has, as the FAU transfer, kind of considered to be the Robin to John L. Davis's Batman during their time together with FAU. It's been crazy, though. John L. Davis going to Arkansas. He's starting to play better now, but he's really had his struggles. Elijah Martin hasn't. He's been a star for Florida, along with Walter Clayton. Walter Clayton, Alex Condon, and Elijah Martin have formed a big three trio, and then you have Will Richard, who's also playing extremely well. Tennessee defensively, they're an elite team as well. So this isn't the greatest DFS environment in the world. So you're going to see there's not a lot of great projections here initially for any of these players. Florida, top 16 in defensive efficiency, top 3 in offensive efficiency. They do play at the 83rd fastest tempo and a lot of green amongst their Ken Palm page. 3rd in offensive rebounding efficiency, 4th in defensive field goal percentage, 4th in 3-point percentage defensive, I should say, and then 8th in 2-point field goal percentage defense. So they're really, really strong on that side. And then you look at Tennessee, second in defensive efficiency, number 1 defensive field goal percentage, 7th in offensive rebounding efficiency, top 35 in offensive efficiency, number 1 3-point defense. This is a very big defensive battle. KenPom does have it 71-68 in favor of the Vols. I do think unless this one goes to overtime, which is definitely possible, that we see a relatively low-scoring game. A lot of high-priced options. This is the one that's going to scare a lot of people off. I don't expect a lot of ownership on this game in general. That means if you are a big-time MME player, you want to take advantage of this tournament that's on the main slate here, that it's a 5K to first. It's a little higher than what we have been normally getting so far. We want them to keep cranking that up, but a 5K to first at least gets the juices flowing on the first day of February. But getting some exposure here to some high-caliber players such as Walter Clayton, such as Igor Milicic, or Will Richard could be a very advantageous thing to do, considering the fact that nobody's going to be on any of those players. Perhaps a little bit of a sneak here. We did see Thomas Hauff play a little bit more. Will Richard was expected to possibly miss some time. That didn't happen. Thomas played 24 minutes against Georgia, had a monster game, 13 points, 11 rebounds. It did turn into a massive blowout, but he's starting to become very interesting as a value again. In the non-con, he was playing really well as a second unit play. In the first part of the SEC games, he wasn't much of a factor, but they are starting to utilize him more, and that's just part of the wear and tear that happens to these guys as the season wears on. So he's actually somewhat of an interesting look there at 5-1, but obviously not a lot of main team looks here in this one. All right. I hope I'm not still muted. I got myself on the screen now, so if that's still the case, please let me know. Yeah, it's February tomorrow here in the Pacific Northwest, but depending on where you are in the country, as I said in the beginning of the show, it is February 1st. So yeah. Got a lot of East Coast followers, and by my count, it's 1:42 in the morning there for their time. Anyways, Pittsburgh versus Wake Forest. Next game on the slate here, 138.5 total. Wake Forest, a 2-point favorite. Seeing a lot of people on socials talking about this Wake Forest bet. Man, this is a great bet. We got to bet Wake Forest. I watched a lot of Wake Forest games this year, coincidentally. I don't know that we got to bet Wake Forest in this one. I actually kind of like Pitt here, going against the grain here, which is pretty typical for me to do. Pitt has a pretty solid defense in their own right, and we've seen Wake Forest be a very fantasy-friendly unit overall. Pittsburgh, 21st in offensive efficiency, much better than you probably expect. 60th in defensive efficiency. They're 14-6 under Jeff Capel. They have lost 4 of their last 6, but hey, they've won 2 in a row against a North Carolina team at home and on the road against Syracuse. Syracuse game was a little bit choppy, but they did get there. KenPom does have this as a 69-68 victory for Pitt. Now, Wake Forest, 22nd in defensive efficiency. They've been good because they've been forcing turnovers, but you see in conference, they haven't been a team that we've necessarily had to be afraid of all that often. We've seen some pretty high fantasy point totals against them. Offensively, much worse, 185th overall offensive efficiency, and they're, believe it or not, one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in America, 351st ranked 3-point offense. It is horrible. 9th in block efficiency. They are a shot blocking team galore, but the problem is they just, in this day and age, if you can't shoot threes, sometimes you get bombed out, and that is a very tough situation. Looking at it, their best 3-point shooter is Trevon Spillers, the App State transfer, 33%, but that's on 24 attempts. Then you have Hunter Salas, 109 attempts, shooting at 31%. This is a interesting game. I think a lot of people are going to be a little bit spooked on this one as well, at least from the Wake Forest side of things. There's a lot of inconsistencies with that team. You'll see Tyler Johnson on the screen there, projects extremely well. He's had a ton of really good games in conference, and since he started playing more minutes, the Logs haven't had a chance to really kind of catch up quantity-wise. So he does project a little bit better than maybe I would have him. I'll probably tone him down a little bit, but he's definitely the best play on Wake Forest from a minutes, usage, and price perspective. Pittsburgh, got to make some decisions here. Guillermo Diaz-Graham is priced at 3.8K. We get a little bit of messing around here by Coach Capel. We had a situation where Graham, starting playing huge minutes in that Clemson game. He was phenomenal, right? Played 34 minutes there, 10 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, a block, just absolutely just nuked. Very next game against Syracuse, everybody and their mom rosters him because he's cheap. Suddenly he gets rug pulled and plays only 16 minutes. Typical Coach Capel move there. Really, really cost us because he didn't do a whole lot then. 3 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. Damian Dunn was also out of the starting lineup as we saw Diaz-Graham, Lowe, Corhen, Austin, and Leggett. We did see a situation change against North Carolina, though. Into the starting lineup went Damian Dunn. Guillermo Diaz-Graham came off the bench, played 18 minutes, was fairly productive at a low price, 6 points, 4 rebounds, and an assist. Don't know if he'll start here against Wake Forest. Probably a good bet that they go back to Damian Dunn, especially considering the fact they ran a 7-man rotation here and didn't use any of their young freshmen against North Carolina and just ran Damian Dunn into the ground, playing him 36 minutes. Leggett and Lowe both 38, and Zach Austin was able to stay on the floor for 39. Cam Corhen 28, and then we saw a couple of minutes from Jorge Diaz-Graham. So we like the short rotation. We appreciate that very much, Coach Capel. But can you give Guillermo a little bit more playing time, please? Priced at a very affordable 3.8K. If he starts, he's absolutely a no-brainer. If he doesn't start, it becomes a little bit tougher. That's a very easy price to throw in. And I'm going to give you one of my Dub-isms, Walt-isms, SuperShow-isms, whatever you want to call them. You've heard me say it many times. Some of you are new, so we probably haven't. But that price for Diaz-Graham is one of those situations where it's less about the points he scores for us and more about the flexibility he allows. We can roster some higher tier players, maybe get some 40s and 50s out of it. Diaz-Graham drops a 7. It's less painful when we have these pay-up guys dropping a much higher number. So the lineup flexibility that he offers, as long as he doesn't drop a 0, that's fine. It's something about a 0 that just demoralizes and makes it seem impossible. If he can give us a 2x return at 3.8, then we feel extremely good about it. Right now, I have him at 21 minutes, unrefined. Putting him around where he's been, 17 to 18. Like, he's not quite at value. But still, if he gives me 14, 15 points at that price, I'm pretty damn ecstatic about it. We can assume Ish Leggett, who's priced reasonably at 8.6, and Julian Lowe at 10K, are going to play the entire game as they usually do. These are some high floor safe options. You don't going to get a ton of upside here. Looking at this slate overall, there are some cheapies, so I don't know that raw points are going to get you there. I think you're going to need to hit a couple of 5x spots. So these guys, while they won't hurt your lineup, they don't necessarily bring you over the top unless they have one of those games where they're dropping 5, 6 steals, which is definitely possible. We've seen it very, very often. Zach Austin and Cam Corhen, we were all over them against North Carolina. We're suckers for DVP, so we're all about that life. Zach Austin had a really nice game there, 30 fantasy points, 5 block shots. He's been a shot blocking machine. Don't like him here as much against the Wake Forest front court. And I'd say the same about Cam Corhen, who didn't rebound quite as well as I had hoped he would, but he had a solid game nonetheless. Priced there in that 6K range. They're much easier to get to, but I don't see upside games happening from Corhen or Austin either. And then you have Damian Dunn, who as a starter at 4.5, certainly in play. He dropped almost a 1K price drop from the North Carolina game where he was priced at 5.4. I do suspect we see a pretty high amount of ownership on Dunn. He's a kind of a known commodity from his days at Temple. Expect him to play 30+ minutes, and if that's the case, as a starter at 4 or 5, he kind of feels like a much safer value option than Diaz-Graham. So I think the way we're going to play this one, different positions, yes, but whichever starts between the two of Dunn or Graham is just where we go. Probably no need to play both of them, but you can see Dunn there, high end 30, 32 minutes. He's an absolute slam, 20+ minutes. There's going to be a lot of shots in this one. Tempo-wise, I'm not expecting a track meet, but I do think both of these teams will create second and third opportunities. And and that's going to lead to a lot more shots for Damian Dunn. So the 4 or 5 price there seems like a pretty easy one to get to. Swinging back to the Wake Forest side, 5-4 on tight. Tyler Johnson, that's going to be your best bet at 5-4. Again, you have some safer looks here. Hunter Salas, Trayvon Spillers, all of those guys have solid floors, but this Pitt defense, opportunistic as they are forcing a lot of turnovers, making things a little bit muddy, if you will. And we saw Wake Forest, they've had some really strong first halves in their last couple of games, but they haven't been able to close. And it's kind of a situation where it's like, damn, I didn't get any Wake Forest early. Salas has 15 at the half. Like the game against Louisville, they started out hot. Spillers had a nice start. Efton Reed finished really well. But once they got in the second half and Louisville clamped down, it didn't happen for them. So Hunter Salas, I think, had like 3 fantasy points in the second half. Cam Hildreth was complete no-show. Trayvon Spillers got locked up in the second half. Like they were just completely shut down. Pittsburgh defense, definitely better than I think people realize. So I'm not in a hurry here to roster a bunch of Wake Forest plays. So betting-wise, I think Pitt spread and money line is a good shot here. More so on the Damian Dunn value side. You have some safety in Low. You have some safety in Leggett. But we do have 8 other games that we can look through here. Would have preferred a 12-gamer here, DraftKings, but that's okay. It's better than a 3-game. All right, moving on. We have Providence versus St. John's. Total of 143.5. St. John's 13-point favorites. Big old favors here against a Providence team that I already had a very little amount of trust with. They have definitely in the early part of the season exceeded expectations or overachieved, if you will, but they've definitely come back down to earth here now. And you know, they've had injuries, they've had illnesses, they've kind of jumped around here with their starting lineup. We did have an affinity for Ryan Mila, the youngster who, you know, treated us quite well. The news came down of Bryce Hopkins being shut down for the season, going to apply for a medical red shirt and potentially come back next year. I think that's probably what will happen. But with that being said, we're going to look at Ryan Mila again. St. John's is a tough spot. He was awful in their last game and only played 15 minutes against Seton Hall. And his minutes have been kind of trickling down since he did have that illness a week or two back and missed some time. Made his price drop back down under 5K to 4.9. More of a tournament look for sure, but forward eligibility with that price point, knowing how good he actually is. Let's shake off the Seton Hall game. People are going to be, you know, a little burnt off for using him. Low rostership, high upside. I'm definitely on board with using Ryan Mila. I think he's a very interesting play here. Wesley Cardette, he's been in and out. He didn't, you know, he missed time, got hurt. Then he played a couple of minutes against Georgetown. Then he didn't play out all against Seton Hall. Obviously, unless he's starting, that's just a no-go on Cardette. They're not reporting on his injury status at all before the game. So it's like if he doesn't start and you use him, you're really risking it because he's most likely not playing. So you have to really tread carefully with some of these. Another Waltism here. If a normal starter isn't starting, but there's no news about it, you typically don't want to remain on that player. Yes, you may hit and they still play, but more often than not, they don't play at all. Not that Wesley Cardette is some supreme play, but at 4K, if he starts playing 30-plus minutes, yeah, he's absolutely a shot. But the St. John's team's definitely going to smack Providence around. I am very concerned for them. Mentioned last time on the Friars being on the slate that Jaden Pierre always projects like super well. His price is really low, but to tread carefully, I always refine him down a little bit. You'll see he's the highest projected Providence player on the slate right now, but I do have my concerns for him. He does have some really big games against lower tier competition, and that's kind of the deal with him. And then when he plays better teams, you see he struggles a lot more. He did have 16 and 4 against Seton Hall last time out. He's just playing a ton of minutes here, 37, 38, 40 minutes at 5.2. So you're getting a high usage volume type of play here at 5.2. System likes him, but watching Providence games, using my eyeballs, I don't particularly like him very much. His peripherals were solid in the last game, but that's not typically something I can count on for him. And if he's having a bad shooting night, then he's really going to have a bad time, and so is your lineups. He did have 16 and 5 last time they played St. John's back on December 20th. That was in a close loss, 72-70 at home. He had 23. 23 at 5.2 is an acceptable score. Is it going to be enough in large field? Probably not, but it's acceptable. Looking at the last game and how they ran, Jaden Pierre, Bensley Joseph, Corey Floyd all played 35-plus minutes. We saw Oswin Erhumwason fouled out in 21. He would have played more. He was having his way with the Seton Hall front court until those fouls. Mila struggled, got benched in favor of Rich Barron, who had been warning Barron is going to be, he's available. He's been available the last couple of games, but they finally kind of let him loose. Not that he did a whole lot, but they're using him more. He played 20 minutes. Jabri Abdur-Rahim played 14, and then we saw Christ Esendoko play about 10 to 12. He's a foul risk on a slate where value's hard up like it was last time Providence was around. Kind of looked in his direction. Didn't pull the trigger fully. Won't pull the trigger here. Be careful with Providence. They're suddenly without Hopkins, but they have everybody else. And what that's going to equate to is a very Leonard Hamilton-esque 10 to 11-man rotation. I don't like it, and neither should you. Pierre, technically decent enough. He's one of the ones that is going to play the 30-plus minutes, but I just don't have a lot of love for this team, and I still want GPP exposure and interest in Ryan Mila. On the St. John's side, we know our guy, RJ Lewis. He's always in play when he's under 9K. He's right on the cusp there at 8-9. Just does everything. If he doesn't get into foul trouble, he's typically going to rack up rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks, and he'll have those games where he shoots extremely well. Same can be said for our man, Zubi Ejiofor, who holds it down in the low block. This is a spot against Providence. I think he gets the big men into trouble. Oswin and Christ Esendoko have very little chance of not getting into major foul trouble here, in my opinion. Zubi, if he logs 30-plus minutes, he's a great option at 8K. A little bit more affordable than some of the other pay-ups. I know a couple of weeks ago we featured him, and he just had an okay game, but we need to wipe that out of our minds here and look to him. I think St. John's has their way in every facet of the game here. Aaron Scott, I don't know if he remains cheap on FanDuel, but he was like below 5K there on FanDuel. FanDuel pricing has been very soft lately. At 6'9", it's a little bit tougher there to really justify, although he did kick the tires right off the Georgetown wagon. 34 minutes against them, 10 points, 9 rebounds. He's been very good in his role here, and as the season's gone on, he's become a very solid option. Gone are the days of getting him at 5K on DraftKings, but you might still be able to get him for cheap on FanDuel here. Davon Smith is off the injury report, so he is available. He's been dealing with that shoulder injury. I'm a little bit worried about him, though. I wonder what kind of ownership we'll see. He's only priced at 5.7, so I think a lot of people are going to kind of zero in on him because he's typically been priced at 9K, 7.5, 8K, right? If he doesn't start, that's going to be one of those situations where, yeah, you can speculate, but in a main lineup, that's a little bit risky. If he does start, I think you see a huge chunk of ownership going his direction, but I don't think it's as safe as people want to imagine because he suffered that shoulder injury, tried to play a couple of games, right? The Seton Hall game, he played 17 minutes, shot 0 of 6. Like, he put up an 8. That's a very real possibility. If he's still limited or not quite there, he could still not pay off 5.7. Like, I don't expect him to come out and play 33, 35 minutes and just drop his normal total, which is, 25, 26 fantasy points. So there's still going to be some risk here. It's one of those situations where we get an inkling that, yeah, he's going to be 30, 40, 50% owned. We have some built-in leverage there. Now, if he's fine and he had the cortisone shots and there's no pain and he drops to 30, then, oh, well, I guess the slate's over if you faded. But I think there's a lot of advantage here to fading a player like that coming back. I don't know if he'll start. In fact, I kind of feel like he won't. Maybe Simeon Wilcher, who's played really well the last 2 games, continues to start. And maybe it ends up being a situation where they just split, or it becomes a Kadaria Richmond, Simeon Wilcher, Davon Smith, trio that just, kind of splits the minutes. Most of my interest here is going to be on Zuby. Also, if I can get to RJ Lewis, but I certainly want one of these St. John's plays. KenPom score for a 77-63. I do think St. John's coasts into 80-plus points rather easily. Providence turning it over at an alarming rate in conference play. They get a lot of their shots blocked because they have a ton of guys who recklessly drive to the basket. Looking at you, Corey Floyd. So there's going to be a lot of block upsides here for Zuby as well. Pulling up that box score from late December in that one, Zuby did have 19 points, 10 rebounds, a smooth double-double. He didn't have any other stats, but 19 and 10 is an acceptable stat line at 8K. Davon Smith did have 17 real in that one. Simeon Welcher in that one started. This was before Aaron Scott got back in the starting lineup. He came off the bench. RJ Lewis had 16, 5, and 3 with 2 steals, and then Kadary Richmond had 10 and 5. So some modest stat lines there, but Zuby with the double-double was the top producer of that one. I don't expect him to be super highly owned either. I think a lot of people will just go to RJ if they can, or they're going to just take the shot on Davon Smith, who's underpriced clearly if he's fully healthy and starting. Remains to be seen if that's going to be the case. Hey, T9X, good to see you. I always can count on you. And Aaron, yeah, February is good. I mean, we had the great first week of January, and then it's been kind of lackadaisical since then. But yeah, I'm excited. Rolling out the red carpet. Everybody's going to run their greenskins. And I'm pretty sure that you had a good lineup tonight because I know you ran who'd you run? You didn't run Robbie Avila. I think you ran Micah Peavy over Mr. Robbie, Toolman Avila there. So I'm pretty sure you had a good night. So that's a good way to end January. At least I hope. All right, next game on the slate here, Missouri versus Mississippi State. Total of 149.5. The Mississippi State team that I have been banging the drum on them and driving the hype train for. They're 6.5-point favorites against Missouri. As much as I like Mississippi State, you might even say I love them, I do think Missouri is a live cover here. Missouri has played extremely well this year, better than most expected, and they've got some bona fide scorers here who have been kind of kept chained up lately, but I think we're about to see some explosions, and I hope we didn't miss it in the last game because there was some big performances here from players on Missouri that I was expecting, but I might have been a little bit too early on and didn't go back to. So we'll see if we can get some love here on the Missouri side. Mississippi State has had some tough games here, certainly, but I still believe they are a top team in the conference, live for a 5 or 6 seed. I feel pretty damn good still about Mississippi State, and this should be a fun game. This is one I have earmarked for a potential extra period or two. Pulling up the Missouri box first. In their last game, they played Ole Miss. It was an impressive 83-75 win at home. What I was speaking on there was Tamar Bates was on him a few slates before. He had some bad shooting nights, had a huge shooting game there against Ole Miss, 26 real points, 4 of 6 from downtown, 5 rebounds, had a really huge game. So I'm hoping that we didn't miss the, buy low bounce back spot for Tamar Bates. He's still very cheap at 6'2", but because of that big game, we may have company on him this time as well. So I think we could see some ownership there. Tamar Bates, for most of the time this year, hasn't been very highly owned. Missouri's been on secondary slates a lot, and I almost always roster Tamar Bates. I don't know why. I just have an affinity for Tamar Bates. Has fantastic overall rates, takes a ton of shots on this team, and when they need a bucket, they're going his way. Leads the team in shot rate at 25.6%, shoots 39% from long range, has a steal rate of 3.5% as well. Actually, it's up to 3.8% in SEC play, which is top 75 in the country. So Bates offers us a lot at 6'2" and a more semi-balanced type of approach here. We also saw, let me pull that score back up. Everybody's favorite, Caleb Grill, have another big game. He hit 5 of 9 from downtown, 22 points, 3 steals. Like they'll do a documentaries on Caleb Grill one day, and wouldn't you know it, he's the highest price play on Missouri at this point at 7.2K, playing 30 minutes off the bench. So if he doesn't start, doesn't matter. If you want to play him, he scored 35 plus in 3 of his last 4. One of the only times he didn't produce was when he was super chalky against Auburn at 3.6, and he failed to even register a 3X number, which was pretty comical to say the least. But since then, he's absolutely been destroying. I still prefer Tamar Bates, but Grill, there's something to be said about the amount of shots he's chucking up here, and this is a spot where he can definitely do so even on the road against what I believe is still a tough Mississippi State team. The projections are always going to like Trent Pierce, who's priced there at 5'2". He did play 33 minutes in that last game against Ole Miss. He just takes a ton of shots. He hasn't been particularly efficient with that, but he played the most minutes in their last game. He does have a solid 22.4% shot rate, and he's over 21% usage rate as well. So overall, he's a pretty nice play as well. This could be a nice little buy low, blow up spot for him. He does have guard forward eligibility. He gets slept on a lot. There's another player for Missouri that just doesn't get rostered all that much. The starting five for Missouri, because I feel like since they're not on the main slate all that much, people don't know. They usually run out Trent Pierce, Tamar Bates, Tony Perkins. Yes, he's still alive as well. Mark Mitchell and Anthony Robinson. And then we see the great and mighty powerful Caleb Grill off the bench along with Josh Gray. And then some combination usually of Jacob Cruz, sometimes Aiden Shaw, and then sometimes the youngster Marcus Allen. The transfer, Horizon League star Marcus Warwick, he did not play in their last game. His minutes have been slowly dwindling. It's safe to say that this was a case of a player who was a star at the mid-major level in the Horizon League transferring to the SEC, and it just clearly didn't work out. Work's a great scorer, but he doesn't have the capability to defend all that well, and he can't create his own shot. So he has to rely on others. He can create against Horizon-level defenders, but not SEC players. So unfortunately, he's not playing a whole lot. But we have seen a shift in Missouri's rotation, and it's gotten a little shallower, for lack of a better term. So we can definitely look at any of those starters. I would be a little bit leery of using Tony Perkins. I know he's cheap at 4.3, and he did put up 19 in their last game. He's put up 18 plus in 2 of their last 3. So definitely a cheap option there. But if you look through his minutes, they're far from safe. And that has to do with the fact that Caleb Grill is the almighty and powerful. In fact, I think I'm just going to only refer to him as the almighty and powerful Wizard of Oz, Caleb Grill, from now on. So because of that, Tony Perkins' minutes, they're not particularly great. They were against Ole Miss because there were some foul issues to some others, but I just would hate to get burned there by Perkins. I think it's a little bit risky, especially when we have Damian Dunn there in the Pitt game that we just talked about. We know there's going to be minutes there, or even taking that shot on Guillermo Diaz-Graham in hopes that he comes through with a 20 as well. So I'm not going to be there on Perkins, but I'll be curious to see where people are. But Tamar Bates, Trent Pierce, 2 very solid priced options that fit a semi-balanced build very, very well. Anthony Robinson is there at 6'6". He's a little bit pricey at this point. He's got a high steal rate. He is very handsy. He's very aggressive. You'll find that his foul rate has absolutely skyrocketed, especially in SEC play, so it makes him a little bit riskier. He's up to 4.6 fouls per 40 now. He does draw 6 fouls per 40, and he's hitting about 41% from mid-long range. He's still only a sophomore, so a lot of development still to go. Once some of these guys graduate and leave, he's going to be an absolute stud next year, but he has to figure out that foul rate. In SEC play, that puppy has ballooned up to nearly 6 fouls per 40. Imagine that. So a little bit of a risk there at 6'6". And then, of course, you've got tried and true brand favorite. We haven't talked about him or used him all that much this year, Mark Mitchell. He's been in the posh play a couple of times earlier this year. He's a steady producer, priced at $7K. It's fair for him. I would rather go down to Bates and Pierce, or even go up to Caleb Grill maybe. But I do like Mark Mitchell. I worry about his rebounding upside, though, because Mississippi State's front court is really no joke. And this would be one of those games where I think he gets a real low rebounding number. And if he's not hitting his shots like he wasn't against Texas or Ole Miss, he's just not going to get there. So a little bit of a downer there for Mitchell, but expect low rostership, perhaps a bounce back spot. We're all looking at Bates or Grill. Nobody looking at Mark Mitchell. You know what's going to happen. Mark Mitchell is going to deliver a marquee performance. Now on the Mississippi State side, and looking at before there, you see Tamar Bates projects extremely well. Mark Mitchell does as well. Tony Perkins, not so much because he's been terrible this year. Caleb Grill, who's been an absolute stud, even at 7'2", we have him up over 30. So he's just too good. He's too cool for school. All right. So going down to the Mississippi State side, not a ton of great overall projections, but I do like this team. Missouri has been a solid defense. They're top 50 in defensive efficiency. Offensive efficiency is top 24. So definitely a team that has held their own. Held Arkansas to 63. Texas they lost to, but they were held to 61. 66 against Vanderbilt, 67 against LSU. So they've been doing quite well defensively. They did beat Florida 83-82 in that game as well on the road. That was one of the most impressive games I've seen from Missouri. So overall, the numbers aren't going to look too great for Mississippi State. They do have a somewhat deep rotation as well, but I'm still a believer in this team. 18th in offensive efficiency, 44th in defensive efficiency as well. They're not particularly great shooting the ball. We did see Hubbard try to single-handedly carry his team to a win over Alabama, but normally this team does not shoot very well, and that has been the main Achilles heel for them. But they're all still priced very low. You can have Josh Hubbard for the low price of 7.4. It's up from 6.6, but it's still very cheap. And all season I've been saying, hey, Hubbard can blow up at any time. You want a GPP look at Josh Hubbard. These prices, they're just way too cheap. I certainly wouldn't be going back to him in the main lineup and chasing that performance, but that just proves the volume's been there. It's going to remain there. Yes, he shot 6 of 15 from downtown, but look at his other games. 9 attempts, 12, 4, 10. Like, he's chucking and going to continue to do so. And if this game with Missouri is close as it looks to be, he's going to be one of the key factors for them to be able to win this game. Cam Matthews has kind of been burning people lately. Still, he typically projects well. He gets all of the peripherals. He has been a fouling machine in SEC play, so you have to be careful there. But one thing has to be said about a player who only needs to take 2 shots like he did against Bama and still put up nearly 30 because of his peripherals being so strong. He's an excellent rebounder. He has a solid block and steal rate. He doesn't need to score in order to pay off this 7.2 price. Now, when he does, on the off chance, like the game earlier in January against Kentucky, where he hit a couple threes, he got to the foul line, he scored 19 real, that's when you see he puts up type of score that he's got to have it to win tournaments. He put up 50 against Kentucky, 33 against Vanderbilt. Those were both games he scored 16 and 19 points. Doesn't happen very often, but it does, and it will need to here against Missouri. I don't think we'll see a lot of rostership on any of these Mississippi State guys. Lots of great leverage and GPP opportunities here with these guys. Sean Murphy is probably still my favorite play from this team. He is priced at 7K, and he comes off the bench. That's an automatic turnoff for most people, but when you watch these Mississippi State games, and I would encourage you to watch this one if you can, in crunch time in the second half, he is playing. He's the one on the floor. He's getting those minutes. And Matthews continually getting into foul trouble benefits Murphy. But when he's on the floor, he is contributing at a high level. His fantasy point per minute number continues to balloon. He has solid overall rates. And this is a player who really only needs 25-ish minutes to still pay off a 7K price because he's that active. It's a more of a luxury play. There's a lot in this 7K range that I like. We're going to have to refine down our player pool here, even though it's only a 10-game slate. There's still a lot of options here to prune through, and he's definitely in the mix. Claudell Harris, he's been kind of trending downward. He played 32 minutes against South Carolina, which was a little bit surprising because he's been dealing with a kind of an undisclosed injury. They're being a little bit weird about the injury reporting with him, but he only played 20 minutes against Bama. Felt like the pace got a little too fast for him. So he has been very good to us earlier in the year, but not so much now. Riley QL is only 4.6. So Mr. Kugel, I mean, you think Claudell's trending the wrong way. He's played 30, 25, 32, and 25 minutes over the last 4. So Riley Kugel is definitely a strong value play. Put up almost 20 against Bama on only 3 shots. Shows you how great he can be in those other categories. 3 steals, 2 blocks, 3 assists, 3 rebounds. He hasn't been a huge peripheral guy as much in SEC play, but historically he has contributed in those categories during his time at Florida and the non-con for Mississippi State. It seemed like he might have been in the doghouse there for a little bit at the end of December, early January, but he's clearly a part of this rotation and a big key piece to what they're doing. And looking at the second half unit, especially the last 5 to 6 minutes of the game, Kugel and Murphy were the ones on the floor there. So those are your closers. They might not start, but they close. And then you have RJ Melendez, who did have some sort of minor injury transpire. He also got flagged, I believe, for a flagrant. Weird stuff happened in that Alabama game for him. So kind of leery on using him right now anyways, but this is the spot where Melendez will inexplicably drop a 50 at 4%. So keep that in mind, but he is a pretty mediocre play on paper. But again, another leverage opportunity. And I still really like Michael Nwoko as a value piece. Did use him against Bama. He got value, but minutes he starts. Minutes are stuck, though. He's not ever going to play over 20. He's kind of like Sean Stewart on Ohio State in that regard. Has upside, but the minutes just aren't there consistently. 4.7 does keep him in play as a value option. Would rather use Riley Kugel there. And then Sean Jones priced at 3.9, playing a 20 to 25-minute role off the bench. Also, if you're very desperate or trying to expand out your player pool, as another potential look that you can have. Kugel, clearly the best overall look on this team, though. And you can look at nobody really projects all that well except Riley Kugel at the 24-minute mark. Probably a safe-ish amount to give him. Now, Claudell Harris only played 20-21. Say Kugel, anything above that, I actually am probably going to put him around 26. Doesn't quite make him an auto play value, but he's definitely going to be a top 5 value piece on this particular slate. And I don't know that people are going to make that recognition with him because he doesn't start. All right, let's move on to Creighton versus Villanova. Total of 143.5. By the way, a lot of these totals are fairly low. The highest total on the slate happened to be the Missouri-Mississippi State game. Not Arizona ASU, as I think a lot of people will think. Auburn, Ole Miss, pretty high, but the Missouri-Mississippi State game definitely flagging as one of the highest on the slate for what it's worth. Anyways, Creighton versus Villanova. Villanova 2-point favorites. 143.5 total. We've gotten past and grown past the, Villanova's favored, we need to bet the other side. We stopped doing that like a month ago. But I still have a lot of uncomfortability with this Villanova team. But they're playing against a Creighton team that has been extremely fantasy friendly throughout Big East play. All right, take care, Aaron. Good seeing you, man. Appreciate it. Definitely drop some comments on the on-demand version of the show. Rest, sleep well. See you in a couple hours, my friend. All right. Anyways, Creighton has been involved in really fantasy-friendly games. The Xavier game, perfect example of that. They end up winning 86-77, just casually putting up nearly 90. Defensively, they are 34th overall in defensive efficiency, but they have been got into games that are just super up tempo for them. Like they've been pushed into higher tempo games. And then you look at some of the fantasy production against them in conference play, especially, it's been very, very alluring. Now they've had a soft part of their schedule, DePaul, Seton Hall. So they've blown the doors off of those teams and they haven't looked as good, or they've looked tougher than they probably should. Marquette, a bunch of fantasy goodness there. Butler, they gave up a 76 to Butler. Connecticut in that game, there was a huge production from a man, Jalen Stewart. So the ball shot well. Overall, I think that this Creighton team can be exploited. And we certainly want to look at various Villanova options for that reason. Eric Dixon is very expensive at 9.8. I have noticed a shift in the kind of public perception of Dixon, where he went from being auto 40% or more owned to now less than 25%. So it'll be interesting to see where people use him here against this Creighton squad. We know he's going to take a ton of shots overall, and he has a pretty solid floor of around 30 to 32 fantasy points. But how much more over that can he get? It does seem like he's been a little bit more tired quicker, and that happens when you're playing every minute of the game, hard carrying a team. So a little bit worried there on Dixon to a degree. I do still like Wooga Poplar a lot. He left a bad taste in my mouth against Georgetown when he got expelled from the game. Definitely a little bit of a slap in the mouth, but he's done very well for us. I do think he can play well against this Creighton team. Didn't do as well against Marquette, at least offensively, and he did have some foul issues, but he still got himself to 20, which wasn't at value at his score, but he only took 5 shots and still got himself close. So that's a little bit of a nice thing to have in your pocket there when it comes to Wooga Poplar. He has a pretty solid in-conference rebounding rate as well. Definitely the play on Nova that I think is the the best overall when factoring in minutes, opportunity, and price, but he's far from a must play. He does project extremely well, as you can see there, especially if you're going to play over 30 minutes. Just has some really great rates in conference play, and they're playing a Creighton team that, again, is fantasy friendly. We did see a shift. Let me see here. We saw Tyler Perkins start last game and play 30 minutes, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that Wooga got tossed from the last game, so it was a disciplinary thing. Wooga still ended up playing 27. We'll see if he gets back in the starting lineup. If he does, I like him for closer to that 33, 34-minute mark. If Perkins starts over him again, we'll lower him down to the 26, 27-minute range. But overall, it's not like Villanova's deep. Josiah Mosley and Chris Parker, really their only other bench pieces besides Tyler Perkins usually. Jordan Longino, Jameer Brickus, Eric Dixon, and then that fourth starter between Perkins and Poplar are going to play 32 or 33 minutes at worst. Enoch Bokai is going to share minutes with those others, the freshmen Parker and Mosley. Longino is a high price of 6-7 now. That's a little bit tough to get to. He had a really huge game against Marquette. Hit a couple of threes, but he got himself to the foul line a lot. He just racked up free throw after free throw after free throw. Did have 7 assists as well, but 43 for him, so that's caused his price to absolutely balloon. It'd be hard for me to go there with him as that's just way too high. But clearly shows you that this Villanova team has some pop. Tyler Perkins as a potential starter at 4-4 is at least interesting. He was the main benefactor with Poplar getting tossed in the Georgetown game, played 34 minutes then, played 30 minutes as the starter against Marquette. 3 straight games of 29 minutes or more at 4-4. Hasn't done a ton with those minutes, but he has scored at least 16 fantasy points when playing 30 or more minutes. That's just fine at 4-4. Our value piece is getting that 4X number. We'll take that all day long. Let me get that salary savings. Definitely kind of a mid value for me behind some of the other options like a Riley Kugel, like a Damian Dunn. But he's definitely up there and a usable option that I have no real issues with if you want to go that route. Now, the Creighton side. What's up, AJ? I'll pop some bets on here for you near the end. And then tomorrow morning on the network, Mike Randall does his betting show. I'd highly advise looking at that. He is a extremely profitable bettor. But we have some good ones here for you tonight as well. So I'll get those to you shortly. All right, with Creighton, you'll see here not a ton of great overall projections here. Villanova's defense has actually tightened a bit. Jemiah Neal as the best projection there at 7.6K. It was all over Jemiah on that last slate. We saw kind of decent ownership in the 30s there, but still probably not as much as he should have been there. Coming off that poor game against Seton Hall, it just seemed like a really obvious buy low spot at 7.3. He automatically gets brownie points in my eyes because he's got that guard forward eligibility. I love my flexibility with players. We knew he's going to play 30-plus minutes. Creighton, their bench is expanding, but Jemiah is a player that's just going to get a lot in a close game. And it was very obvious that, hey, blowouts the last 2 have affected him. He should play very well. He did foul out against Xavier in 34 minutes, but he put up 38. His price has gone up 300. I do like the idea of going back to him again. This is a player I'm pretty comfortable with at this point. To start the season, I wasn't comfortable because Jemiah Neal, ASU, the guy had just kind of hammered us in the head many times last year. But he's become a pretty consistent option. And for a while, he was almost unplayable just because he was priced at nearly 9K, but he was dropping 50s and 40s, but you just can't play Jemiah Neal at 9K. I can play him at 7.6, and I definitely am leaning towards that direction because I'm so confident with the ability that he has to rack up in those other categories. Rebounds, assists, all of that secondary stuff. So definitely on Neal. Looking at it, he's really been good with Creighton. 21.5% shot rate, shooting 35% from long range. His rates otherwise aren't jumping off the page, but he's just one of those guys who finds a way to rack up stats and fill up the box score. So we're definitely on board with that. Ryan Kalkbrenner is expensive at 10.2. That's probably going to be tough for me to get to. I think at this point, he's reached a level where people are just going to kind of plug and play him. He's the beginning of the season, he dropped that like legacy game that we'll probably not see a long time. Anyone dropping 75, that was a hell of a game. That was a fun one. But he's been dropping 40s with regularity in conference play here, especially over the last month of the season. So I think it's come to a point where people are going to find a way to get him in because he provides that safety. But there is a really good chance of him just putting up 30 here on the road. It's been slightly worse on the road, not by much, but it's definitely a concerning price for me now with Ryan Kalkbrenner. I do really like him. I have found, though, even on the days where he breaks it or puts up 40 plus, I've still managed to be profitable without him. So I think that he's a luxury play, but not one that I need to start my lineups with. And I think that's going to be in opposition of the rest of the industry. I think Kalkbrenner is somebody that people are going to start their lineups with. Stephen Ashworth at 9K. He's just a guy that's really solid as well. 30 plus fantasy points. You can pretty much rely on him, but it's a very high price. It gets interesting after the big three of Kalkbrenner, Ashworth, and Neal. You have Jackson McAndrew priced there at 4.2, and he was pretty chalky at 4K there against Xavier. Played 19 minutes, but I have a Jackson McAndrew spiel, and if you've been watching the show any time of, any length of time here over the last 2 months with Creighton slates, you know what that spiel is. McAndrew has to start fast. He did against Xavier, but because of his lack of defensive abilities, he's a young guy still developing, he finds himself on the bench more often than not in the second half, especially in games that are close. So what you need McAndrew to do is hit a couple threes early, grab some rebounds. I mean, in the first half against Xavier, he was over 10 fantasy points. He was rocking and rolling. It's like, this is the start you need. But in the second half, those rebounds went away. The shots didn't fall. He wasn't taking them. And suddenly, he got his usual 19 to 20 minutes. And that's just how it's going to be. McAndrew is a guy, if you play him, he has to start quick because he's just not going to get those minutes in the second half. He usually projects pretty well for us. I have him kind of forecasted for 18 minutes, not quite as well. The player I do want to highlight is Fedor Zugic, who I got a little too enamored with on the last slate because, I'm honestly obsessed with being early on guys sometimes, and I don't want to do it just on any player, just for the sake of being early. It's a player that I think has a chance to be good. I want to be early on that player, and I want to look at these trends with them. Fedor is trending in the right direction where a maybe not a blow-up game, but a game where he exceeds value by quite a bit is coming. 8 minutes against Providence. He just got cleared not that long ago. 10 fantasy points there, 6 points, 2 rebounds and assists. Pretty solid for 8 minutes. Then he played 16 against DePaul. Granted, it was a blowout. 8 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, hit a 3. Blowout win over Seton Hall. He was given 17 minutes, 9 points, 2 assists, 2 rebounds, hit 2 threes. Trending in the right direction. So I got caught out a little bit because I got too enamored. So where most people went McAndrew there, I did go Fedor. And yes, I lost out on that. But Fedor played 20 minutes, and he was playing minutes when the game was close. That game remained close throughout, but he was in there in crunch time. He made a key block at one point. He had a really pretty slick pass into an assist, and he did hit a 3. Took 3 shots there, 20 minutes. Like, that could have worked out really, really well. I think those minutes are here to stay. They might even continue to trend up. When you look at Creighton's bench outside of, the occasional Isaac Trout game where he's hitting a couple of threes, and he had a pretty solid outing, 12 points, a couple of threes, 5-7 from the field. Like, you'll see that randomness from him. But outside of him, they don't really have anyone you can count on. For some reason, Frederick King, the backup center, can only be good when Kalkbrenner is out for a game. It's such a weird thing. King can't be good at any other time. So they can't rely on those guys. Jason Green, Mason Miller, all of these guys. But I think they're going to be able to rely on Fedor. And he is a player with a very bright future on this team as well. And again, I want to be early. We have the value in other places. Pretty much every game we've pulled a value out that we can look to. But Fedor, if you're running multiple entries in that 5K to first, I will tell you to rock and roll with him in at least one of those lineups. Not quite a line in the sand, like you got to play him no matter what. But if he keeps trending upwards, and into this, 20-minute realm, 21, maybe 22 minutes. I mean, all he needs to do is hit two of those 3 to 4 shot attempts, grab a rebound or 2, get an assist, maybe passes it back to Ashworth and he fires up a 3. The block, I don't know, that came out of nowhere. I didn't know if Fedor had that in his bag, but he does. Still very raw, but clearly they're pushing him quickly. His minutes are trending in the right direction. So not a core play by any means, but if you don't get exposure to Fedor Zukic, I think it's a mistake. Very easily could drop 5 fantasy points only, but there is a chance here that Fedor blows up. There is going to be a game before the season ends, and I think he might be an important part of the rotation by the time we get into March Madness as well. So keep that in mind. He is a very high upside, high potential player that just needs to be unlocked. But it is cute playing him over McAndrew. I agree. But he's playing in the second half while McAndrew is not. So anyways, let's move on to the next game here. Arizona versus Arizona State. Total of 146.5. The Wildcats on the road, technically 6.5-point favorites against the Sun Devils. This is a very obvious spot where we want a game stack, especially on the Arizona side. We might be forced into some ASU exposure as well, simply because they have a ton of issues. What kind of issues do they have? Well, they are missing a numerous amounts of players potentially. BJ Freeman, the latest, he left their game against Colorado 4 minutes in, suffered a injury. I had the ASU mini stack there because, hey, Jaden Quaintance was out. Especially had Freeman. He was relatively highly owned, but it was a death sentence having him leave the game 4 minutes in. So highly questionable. After halftime, he was in street clothes, and that was that. I think there's a very good chance he does not play. Jaden Quaintance, who did miss that last game, I do think there's a pretty good chance he does play. We'll see. I think he has a better chance to play than Freeman, but potentially without 2 starters here for ASU, and that is just such a tough situation to be in. Here's what we'd be looking at if they don't have those 2 guys. A likely starting lineup that includes Adam Miller, Alston Mason, Bashir Jihad, Sean Phillips, who came in the starting lineup without JQ, and then I would say that the freshman Josin Senin comes in for Freeman. That leaves them with Amir Ali off the bench, and really that's probably it. We did see Trevor Best come in and play like 2 minutes to give a water break, and perhaps maybe we even see something from Brandon Gardner, but they don't have much of a bench there. So what you're going to get is a situation in which Adam Miller plays 39-40 minutes the entire game. Alston Mason has to play 39-40 minutes. They will lean on Bashir Jihad. If he doesn't get into foul trouble, he's going to have to play 35-36 minutes. And then you saw Sean Phillips in relief of JQ. He played 29 to 30 minutes as well, and he had a really strong game, priced at 4-4. Don't love the matchup at all. Arizona has a very stout front court that can get Phillips into foul trouble. You look at Phillips, 4 of his last 5 games, he's been at 4 fouls, and he's only played over 20 minutes once in those 5 games. So an alarming foul rate that Sean Phillips has, and you're asking him to go up against a very talented and honestly way too skilled for him front court of Arizona. Phillips currently has a 7. Sink that in for a minute. Let that sink in. 7.3 fouls called per 40. The chances of him getting into early foul trouble against this Arizona team is extremely high. If JQ's not around, it is going to be tough because you want to play Phillips 4-4. The attempts are going to be there, but he's just going to foul. But it's very hard not to want to use him because they might potentially only have 6 guys and a couple of walk-ons. Would probably recommend more so going Josin Senin. Now, he really bricked against Colorado. That was a disappointment because he played 30 minutes. Felt pretty smug about that play, honestly, because like they don't have anyone else. He's going to have to play. Did pretty well against Iowa State, honestly, but only 1 of 6 against Colorado. You could tell that elevation first time for him. It bothered him. It wasn't great, and he struggled and probably should have accounted for that more. But I like his chances of exceeding value at 4-2, playing 30-plus minutes if there's no Freeman, especially if there's no JQ. I think that's a value play that I moved near the top of my list, regardless of matchup. That's one of those few times where I won't take DVP into account as much, and I will take price, minutes, opportunity into account more at that price. We also have an interesting look with Amir Ali, who's priced at only 3-4. He played 27 minutes against Colorado out of a necessity, 6.7 rebounds and an assist. This is a player I could see benefiting a great deal from Sean Phillips starting, getting into early foul trouble and stepping in and just, grabbing rebounds and just getting volume because he'll be out there for 28 to 30 minutes at a 3-4 price. We're not talking about him giving us 25, 26, 30 fantasy points, but he doesn't need to give us that. If he plays 30 minutes at 3-4, he's going to make value. That's just, that's going to happen because he's going to grab rebounds and they don't have much of a front court left over. And I almost kind of feel like Bashir Jihad might get into foul trouble. Like we might be in a situation where multiple players do, and they just have to play through it, or they're going to be using walk-ons. So Amir Ali is in a very good situation here at 3-4. Guard forward eligibility. I think he's a very highly rated value as well, only if Freeman and JQ are out. If JQ's out and Freeman plays, I'm not as excited about Ali. If Freeman's out and JQ plays, I am still pretty excited about Ali. And what I mean by excited is not like, Yahoo, this is a great player, let's go. Just, hey, he's going to give us a ton of lineup flexibility, salary relief. There's a pretty damn good chance that he gives us a 4 or 5x return as well. You can look at the tentative minutes here. I did do some slight editing before the show. You can see, just because of all the minutes that are available here, that these guys should be able to pretty much get there. Adam Miller's the one at 5-5. That's not particularly exciting. He's very disappointed in Adam Miller's career, honestly, but he has cheap at 5-5, potentially playing the entire game, so you have that. But I'm really just looking at Ali Sanin and lesser degree Phillips because I just know he's probably going to get into foul trouble. But that's some really good salary options for us to have, and we have numerous amounts on this slate already. 6 games in, and we've got 5 or 6 value pieces that we can definitely run with. 2, maybe even 3 of that group into our main builds. But we'll see how it shakes out. Again, I think JQ plays. I think BJ Freeman doesn't. My injury predictions the last week haven't been great, so admittedly it'll probably be opposite. But reading the reports, looking at message boards, beats, all that stuff, it really sounds like Freeman is not going to play. But we'll see. On the Arizona side, it is all good. Anytime ASU's on the slate, they're just like UCF. They're just like anytime UCF or Arizona State's on the slate, and they played each other that time, and it was great for us. We want to stack against them. They're just a very fantasy-friendly group at this point. ASU, shorthanded, might be using some walk-ons if it gets real ugly. Arizona guys are just where it's at, and the prices on them are very affordable. You have 2 in particular who are a little more expensive. Jaden Bradley at 7.6, which to me it's a little too high for him. And then Caleb Love at 8.2, which is GPP extraordinary, could very well be delivering someone 5K tomorrow morning. But where I want to look is my man KJ Lewis, who I really like at this point. I think he's a big stud in the future, and he's developing quickly. Only priced at 5-1, not typically a starter, but he's playing those 25 to 26 minutes or more. So I really like him. You can see he's one of the higher projected Arizona players there on your screen. Tobo Waka, if he avoids foul trouble, playing 22 to 23 minutes instead of 17. He's a great overall play. Expect him, especially against a front court of ASU that might be down one of their best, most athletic players. Henry Visar, he's kind of fallen off lately, but he's still only priced at 4-4. Very cheap for him. You can definitely look his direction. And then we saw Carter Bryant really bust out. Another freshman. Arizona has an embarrassment of riches, and they're already signing guys for next year. And they'll, of course, be active in the portal. But Carter Bryant there at 3-7 against a very tough Iowa State team in a game that they were able to win in overtime. 27 minutes, and he played most of the overtime, half of the second half. I mean, it was a great performance from him. 14 points, 3 rebounds, 2 steals, 2 blocks. I don't want to get caught chasing that, but Carter Bryant has at least 1 to 2 plays a game that I've watched of the Arizona, and I'd say I've watched probably 5 of their games in the last month. And at least once or twice during those games, I've been like, wow, that was pretty nice. Or wow, this Carter Bryant kid, like he's making things happen. It doesn't always translate to the box score because his minutes are a bit erratic, and we've seen him in and out of the starting lineup. He's not quite to that level yet. He's a little bit still raw, but that game against Iowa State, that shows you what this kid is capable of. He's scored 20 plus fantasy points in 2 of his last 3 as well. Could see him absolutely murk this Arizona State team here, depending on the situation, if it gets out of hand, especially. But Carter Bryant, man, he looked really good and only priced at 3.7. He's an excellent play for an alt build. I don't think people chase that one, as they shouldn't, because we can't sit here and expect 27 minutes from him in a non-overtime game. But I think that at this point, he's got himself wiggled into a 20-minute role. And it does lower the upside for Visar, Awaka, Townsend, all these guys that are basically splitting the minutes at the 4 and the 5, but they're also good on a fantasy point per minute basis, except for Townsend, that they're still great plays at their prices regardless. Or if you get a situation where Awaka benefits from foul trouble, or he plays 29 minutes like he did against Iowa State, then you have a 17 and 12 point game, or 17 point 12 rebound game, and he delivers you 36. He scored 29 or more fantasy points in 3 of his last 4. This Arizona team is scary. We had a big conversation in our Discord earlier today about sneaky, tournament teams getting hot at the right time. It's a little bit too early to say who's getting hot at the right time, because you don't want to get hot until like late February, really. But Arizona, because you don't want to peak too early, but this Arizona team looks scary, and I don't know who would want to see them in the tournament. They have a great front court. They've got a player in Caleb Love who can make any shot at any time. He can also miss any shot at any time, but we saw that against Iowa State. And then they have a developing, budding future superstar, at least in my opinion, in KJ Lewis. So we want multiple pieces of exposure here to this game. KJ Lewis being one of my favorites. Tobe, I think, will be pretty chalky. He was on the last slate, and he came through huge. He's priced there at 5.1. You can fit both Lewis and Tobe relatively easy. Then your GPP looks for Visar and Carter Bryant, up to Caleb Love potentially. Not so much for me on Anthony Del Orso, who has had some nice games, but for the most part, he's a little untrustworthy for me. He is priced at only 3.8. It is a good matchup, so you can go there if you want. And then Trey Townsend, system-wise, this just hasn't been great for him, but he can definitely still pay off 4.1. He's not completely washed. I don't think he's washed at all. Just don't think the system's very good for him. But yeah, we want a lot of exposure to this game. It wouldn't surprise me if I end up with 3 players from this game minimum in my main lineup. Of course, we're going to have to see some news here and some development on the ASU side. If everybody's available, JQ and Freeman play, probably backing off of ASU a great amount and then just sticking in with the Lewis Tobe plays in my main lineup. All right. Let's move on to the next game here. Clemson versus NC State. Total of 133. Clemson, a 5.5 point favorite on the road. Let's get that pulled up here. All right, so NC State going through the Final Four hangover, and this is no real surprise. I had high hopes for NC State to kind of like, for Coach Keats have another really strong season, at least make the tournament, but that's not going to happen. They're 9-11. They're quickly fading. They have some really good young talent on their team. Keats had that, making the tournament and making that run, automatically kicked extra years in his contract. So he's still there past this season, but they have some really good talent. Dennis Parker, you guys know I'm a big fan of. Trey Parker looked really good in the last game. Paul McNeil is a scoring machine from high school. They're starting to play him more. So there's a lot of good young talent on this team. They're going to be getting rid of a ton of seniors, guys like Dontrez Styles, Michael O'Connell, Jaden Taylor. But the potential for this team is still quite high. But they're going to get kicked around a bit here first. And I wonder, the reason I'm kind of setting this up, because I wonder if they're going to start giving Trey Parker, Paul McNeil, Dennis Parker more minutes. Dennis played 10 Trey played 18. We've seen Paul McNeil go from playing none to now 8, 9, 10 as well. Problem with Paul is he's not a great defender yet, so he can't be on the court too long. Trey Parker had a fantastic game, scored 15 points. He was in there at crunch time against Duke, scoring that against them. I mean, in Cameron Indoor. That was a very impressive performance from Trey Parker. I haven't been as impressed lately with Marcus Hill, Michael O'Connell, Ben Middlebrooks. Dontrez Styles had a really nice game, but I'm almost never using Dontrez. And Jaden Taylor, he usually projects fairly decent. And you can see he's only priced at 4.8, and he's got a huge projection here. We're going to refine that down going up against Clemson, but it's really hard to trust in these NC State guys right now. Taylor at that price, I think, is relatively safe if you want to go that direction. But the matchup against Clemson, really not the best. Going through and looking at who Jaden Taylor's done his damage against, SMU, Cal, Virginia Tech, some of the bottom feeders of the conference that are relatively soft defensively. He's had his struggles against the likes of Wake. Duke wasn't a particularly great game for him. So I'm kind of on the fence here with this Clemson spot, but it is a cheap price at 4.8. He was $6K just a week or two ago. You can file him into the value category as a sub 5K piece, and he's definitely, in the player pool. If you're running any multiple entries, I think exposure Trey Parker. I don't know that that's a one-game blip. Seeing how he did against Duke, I think they're going to want to get him in more. Dennis Parker's another player that I've been clamoring to see play more minutes. He has to a degree. Offensively, he's still a little bit too raw, but he does some of the other things, and he gets after on the glass. So I like some of these secondary NC State pieces, but I don't think I'm going to end up with any in the main build. Clemson might be a little bit of a different story. The Wolfpack have really struggled, and it's been a hallmark for them this year. They don't have the interior that they had last year. No DJ Burns. That's tough. No Mo Diarra. Mo Diarra's our dude, right? They don't have that level front court. They got Ben Middlebrooks, who does rebound well. They have BHH, who did well offensively, but they don't particularly hold the interior well at all. That's been an aspect that they've just got absolutely pelted on. They're a horrible defensive rebounding team. Tons of second and third and fourth opportunities against them. One thing they've done well is take care of the basketball, but they can't shoot threes. They don't rebound particularly well. They play at a slow pace, and they're just not it. They're having this a hangover. It's okay, and their fans can't be that mad. I don't think they are. Our man, Alex Aquisa, he understands, that magical Final Four run. They're going to be able to lean their cap on that one for a while. So that this year was always going to be tough. But their interior stinks. I don't know any other way to put it. And going up against a Clemson team that has a pretty solid rebounding group, that's not going to be so good for NC State. And this is a bit of a DVP spot to a degree that we can target. When it comes to who that is for Clemson, we have several options at several different price points. Ian Schiffelin there at 8.1, who has been a great overall rebounder, has a combined rebounding rate of 35%, top 70 defensive rebounding rate. Victor Lakin, 32% combined rebounding rate, also a 9% block rate, 3% steal rate, drawing about 4.5 fouls per 40 and knocking down 36% of his threes. Lakin has the highest usage rate on the team currently and highest shot rate as well. As far as anybody else, we did see some additional minutes there for the freshman Del Jones. We saw some more time for Jake Heidbreder. We've seen some guys in and out here because Clemson did have the illnesses running through. First, it was Dylan Hunter, who was sick, and then his brother Chase came off the bench against Virginia Tech, only played 10. Sounds like he'll be fine, but I mention this every time somebody on the team gets a sickness. It's going to rip through that locker room. So it wouldn't surprise me if somebody else popped up feeling ill, because the Chase Hunter news kind of came out of nowhere. No beats were reporting that beforehand. So we want to be aware of that for this Clemson game. It is a 10:30/1:30 start, so right in the middle part of the slate. in between the last window and the first window. So we'll want to be paying attention to that, because if Schifflin is limited or not starting, or Lockett's limited or not starting, we're going to have some opportunities with some of these other guys. And we saw that in the last game. Del Jones especially played 24 minutes against Virginia Tech, had a huge game. Against Syracuse, he played 15 minutes. For him, had a pretty huge game. He's been very confident, certainly earned more time, sitting there at 3.6. It's a relatively uncomfortable value, but when you look at what he's been able to do when he's given those extra minutes, he's produced each and every time. He's only a freshman, has, quality player written all over him, if those minutes are going to be there for him. And we'll see if Chase is back to his usual self. We also saw extra minutes for Jake Heidbetter over the last 2 minutes because of Dylan and Chase Hunter being sick. So we'll see. Dylan Hunter's still really cheap. He started that game against Virginia Tech, but only played 18 minutes. Really difficult. He's only priced at $4K, but I'm having a hard time. He was great against Pittsburgh, but obviously he was still feeling the remnants of that sickness. So we'll see how the starting lineup shakes out. Chauncey Wiggins is there at 4.9 as well. He finally came alive, hit 4 threes against Virginia Tech, had himself a good game. But DVP-wise, I want to make sure they're fine. If they are, Ian Schifflin at 8.1 is a great overall play if you're not paying up to the top for like a Janai Broome. Schiff makes sense. Or at 6.5 to Victor Locken. I was very upset because we projected him well against Pitt. He only played 20 minutes. He played 32 against Syracuse, had that huge monster game. And then he played only 20 against Virginia Tech, albeit he did have some foul issues there. But his minutes range has been all over the place lately. So it does make me feel a little uncomfortable with him. But I definitely think this is a spot where he could do very well, just because of the weaknesses that the Wolfpack have. But we'll see. Maybe this is a game where we come into it now Jaden Zachary's sick or something. But I do want to monitor Del Jones because of the way that he's been playing. Don't know that I would be brazen enough to use him in the main lineup just yet, but he's clearly pushing for more minutes and has shown that he deserves them. All right, moving on to the next one here. We have Auburn versus Ole Miss. Total of 149.5. Auburn 5.5 point favorite. So it's just basically the same total, just stick under 150 there, like Mississippi State, Missouri. Auburn, best team in the country. It's pretty much a non-negotiable thing at this point that Auburn is the best team in the country. I don't know that anybody can really sit here and say otherwise. You can make a case for some of the other teams that are on the come up. Duke's peaking earlier than I thought they would. Tennessee's still good. Arizona's looking good. Florida's looking good. But yeah, Auburn is just they're a different animal at this point. And the question is going to be, do we just find a way to pay up for Broome? And pretty much every game I've identified at least one player of value under 5K, in some cases even under 4K, that I felt like we could run them in our main lineup. So clearly we have enough value to run Janai Broome. They dominated against LSU. It was a little bit closer than I thought it would be. Broome back in the starting lineup as we expected. 33 minutes played, 34% usage rate, 26 points, 16 rebounds, 3 blocks, 1 steal. His typical ham sandwich self. To me, he's the Naismith winner. I know Cooper Flagg is getting love as the Naismith winner. I hope it's going to be a close race. I hope it doesn't turn into like a co-situation, co-players of the year, because that's lame. But Broome is on his shit. Chad Baker still had a great game, 11.7 assists, 3 steals, and a block. Chad Baker projected really well for that one. We were a little bit uncomfortable with his price, but clearly that's a way for him to still compete with Broome fully healthy and in the lineup. Miles Kelly had a solid game of 13 and 3. Denver Jones was good with 4 steals. Like, they just created a bunch of turnovers, 15 steals against LSU, and pretty much everybody on the team, of the starters at least, had a fairly decent overall DFS score. Going into Ole Miss, a little bit of a tougher matchup than the LSU game was, but just have to make that decision at 10.6K. It's a lot. It's a lot to commit to your lineup. But again, we have that value, and it just seems like we're pretty much locked into, as long as he doesn't get hurt, God forbid, again, we're locked into 40 as a floor. And that's a lot of points to just have in your back pocket, knowing that you have. And it even allows you to take some shots, even in single entry where you want to be a little safer. You can take shots there with a player like Broome because he's typically going to make up for it. If you don't hit on your sneak play, Broome's probably making those points up. As long as he doesn't, your sneak doesn't drop a 1x score, Broome's going to carry the torch. I do think he'll be highly owned. This price will not scare people off. Since he's been back, even at the bench against Tennessee, he was still chalk. At this point, you just roster Broome, and it's crazy because a couple of years ago at Moorhead, he was a guy that we were rostering on the weren't on many slates, but the tournament, I believe it was against West Virginia. Wasn't really that highly owned. And he was dominating against them too. I love Janai Broome. I do, but I have some conflicting issues here with that price of 10-6 because ordinarily I wouldn't be paying up for that. I'd rather go with a more balanced approach, but I am at a point here where I don't know if we can fade Janai Broome right now. Chad Baker's price continues to rise up to 7-3. I wasn't comfortable with it against LSU. He paid it off. Now he's back up to this high level, and he's going to keep on going up. Scoring opportunities are going to be much lower with Broome around. Obviously, we saw that. He still found a way with the 7 assists, but I don't know that we can count on that. So probably far less exposure for Chad Baker for me, far less exposure for guys like Chaney Johnson, Dylan Cardwell. All of their prices really need to come down even further, and I think they will. Cardwell's is already starting to drop again. We'll get him back under 5K, and we can start looking his direction once more. Miles Kelly as a starter playing, basically 30 minutes a game. He's definitely a solid look at 5'2". I'm not really sure why he dropped to 5'2" from 5'8". I will stop short of calling him some sort of lock because he's definitely got a lack of upside most times, but he has shown a pretty solid floor here recently. And it makes it pretty easy when you play next to Janai Broome. One thing that Kelly's done really well that surprised me is he's continued to rebound at a fairly high level. And then you have the starter Denver Jones and the 6-man Todd Pettiford kind of splitting that last guard spot. Pettiford's really, really solid as a GBP look. Price is dwindling back down. We get him back under 5K. We can start looking there. He's a great piece because nobody really rosters him, especially not with Broome back, but he's clearly got a ton of upside. He took 12 shots against LSU with Broome around, 9 against Tennessee, 13 against Georgia, 11 against Mississippi State. Those last two are without Broome, but the 9 and 12 with him shows that he's going to continue to be a very important piece. And offensively, he gives them a lot, but also he's one of those few freshmen who can actually defend. Not on every possession. He gets cooked sometimes, but he can actually cause a lot of chaos and turnovers, as well as steal rate has started to creep very, very high. And you look at his last 4 games, 9 steals over those past 4 alone. Really, really developing well. He's almost getting too good to where I'm worried he's going to be a one and done. But if he comes back next year, he's going to be phenomenal. 28.4% shot rate, 26.6% usage rate, shooting 41% from long range, 3.5% steal rate, 22.2% assist rate on Hod Pettiford. He is great. He is pretty much what he's doing this year is what KD Johnson, and no disrespect to KD, it's been a DFS favorite for a while, I know, but he's what KD Johnson wishes he could have been, or what we had hoped KD Johnson could be. High volume, high usage guy, but no efficiency and no real passing ability there, and high hopes for KD coming off of his freshman season at Georgia. But I think Pettiford is really, really good, and honestly, already better than KD Johnson and what we were hoping KD would be. So hopefully he sticks around for another year, but if he continues to nuke out, I don't know that he will. All right, going over to the projection screen here, you see Broome, like 10-6, 29 minutes. He almost 50. Like it just seems unfadable. It just seems unfadable. We'll find a way. Baker still projects well, but that's a high price for me. Pettiford, probably not getting 23 minutes, probably more like 20. It's not as good of a play. All right, on the Ole Miss side, we've seen a ton of shakeups in the starting lineup, and we've seen guys in and out of injury, sicknesses. Dre Davis was in and out. Matthew Morrell was questionable. Looked like he might miss some time heading into this week, but now he's available per John Rothstein. So we're going to see Morrell. Dre Davis is back as we saw him play against Texas. So they should be completely 100% healthy, good to go with their entire lineup now. Auburn is a really good defense. We know that. They're one of the top offenses and defenses in the country. They will give anyone the business at home or on the road. No real interest in the Ole Miss guys for me. The Auburn team hasn't hit a level like their Houston or, old school Virginia a couple of years ago, where we just wouldn't target against them. They're not to that level, but we're also not dealing with a 2 or 3 game slate where we'd be forced to. So I'm not really going to be going too much on the Ole Miss side. I will admit Jalen Murray is somewhat interesting at that $5K price. That's very, very cheap for him. We've seen him, put up some big scores in the past, but he's been awful in the last 2 games. 3 of his last 4, he's been below 20, and he's still playing high minutes. Matchups have been tough. They've been in a tough stretch here recently, but it doesn't get any easier here against Auburn. So price is good on Murray, but I honestly would be very surprised if he pays that off. Same could be said for Dre Davis, who's priced at only 5.4. He had a really strong game, 17-7 against Texas there. Look for him to have a pretty high usage against Auburn, but again, just not a great matchup spot to really target whatsoever. And the one value piece on the team, Devon Barnes, has seen his minutes kind of fluctuate and start to dwindle down here as Ole Miss gets healthy at every other position. And then you have Malik Dia, who had that sick game for us a couple of weeks back against Alabama, DVP spot. This is not a good spot for him against Auburn. And when they're healthy, man, his minutes, he played 17 against Texas. Get out of here, Chris Beard. Played only 19 against Mississippi State. What are you doing? Millie D needs to be playing a lot of minutes, but can't trust that he will. But they'll have their full allotment available. All right, moving on to the next game here. All right. Assume you guys can still see me. I don't know why my camera just gave it. All right, we're back. We're back in business. Sorry about that. I don't know. My camera just knocked offline there. Self-produced show. I don't know if you guys knew that, but we're back. We're back in business. All right. Wisconsin versus Northwestern. Total of 142.5. A little higher than I might have thought, but not by much. And then Wisconsin has 2.5-point favorites. The wheels have fallen off for Northwestern here. They have been just completely smacked around here. Brooks Barnheiser is, I don't know if he's tiring out. He's getting, he's just not been good lately. And Northwestern, not a great spot here against Wisconsin. At home, 2.5-point dogs. I like Wisconsin to cover. I like the Badgers quite a bit here, honestly, from a betting perspective. But this isn't probably going to be a game that I'm too hyped about from a DFS perspective. Wisconsin, the main guys' prices have all gone so high, right? Mentioned that last time. John Tanya, John Blackwell, both pushing on the door of 8K, have gone down a little bit. You can probably ignore the Max Klesmit projection there. He always has his price is only 4.7. He had some outlier games earlier in the year, and it's caused his projection to be a little bit off. So he looks better than he actually is there. That's another one of those plays to kind of refine down. But this Northwestern team has been fantasy friendly throughout the conference season. So we don't want to completely ignore Wisconsin. There's definitely some viability here to a degree. Pulling up the last few games for Northwestern. The Rutgers game, 79-72. No Dylan Harper, but they had no answer for Ace Bailey. 37-6 with 3 blocks. He was completely unstoppable. Tyson Acuff, they couldn't stop him either off the bench. Had 13. Really solid outing for this Rutgers team. And they did a nice job on Brooks Barnheiser. He had 10 points. He had 6 assists, 9 rebounds. Overall, a decent stat line there, but they need a lot more from Brooks. You go into the last game, they lost by 9 to Illinois. In that one, Morez Johnson had his breakout game against them, a signature performance, 15-9. Casper had 11, 10, and 7. Kylan Boswell had 17. Like, just good performance after good performance. This Northwestern team suddenly has become a very fantasy-friendly group. They're still 42nd in defensive efficiency, but they're not a team that has looked particularly good lately. I do like Blackwell still. His price has dropped considerably from where he was, which was $9K the last, 3 weeks of the season. He's had some really marquee performances here. Now that he's back under 8K, he's definitely in play. He has blossomed with AJ Storr transferring to Kansas. I think that was the best move for everybody. Blackwell leads the team in shot rate at 25.4%, has a usage rate of 25.3%. He is definitely a guy we can look to. I trust him more than a player like John Tanye. Tanye also priced at 7.8K, has the highest usage rate on the team at 26.3% and a shot rate of 24.9% and shooting 41% from long range, which also happens to be the best number on the team. Both of them in play. You can see they project decent enough. Would prefer Blackwell, but neither of them are a priority by any means. Nolan Winter and Stephen Crow have their moments. Northwestern has some size in the front court. Nolan Winter's minutes have really dwindled to a level that makes me a bit puzzled. He had foul trouble against Maryland, but even in games he hasn't been having foul issues. He's been playing 19 or less minutes. Yes, there was a blowout win over Nebraska, but close loss to UCLA, played only 19. Close win over Ohio State, played 18. So it's really hard to get too excited about him, even though that price of 5.6 is fairly intriguing. Hard to argue against that. And then you have Crowd there at 6K, who almost inexplicably has good games against harder opponents like he did against Maryland. But I don't know that I would use him in this spot against Northwestern. If he stays out of foul trouble, I definitely think he can give us close to a 4X return, but not enough points on this slate where I think we're going to need to, again, hit some 5X, 6X type spots. So none of the Wisconsin guys really look that great to me from a tournament perspective. And again, on Max Klesman, I mean, he's hit 20 in 2 of his last 3. It's definitely possible. But I have a hard time really grouping him with some of those other values. But it does go to show that here's another guy under 5K that at least has some viability to a degree. On the Northwestern side, they did get here, let me pull that up. They got Angel Ciaravino back. He did play 18 minutes against Rutgers, and he was fairly solid. He was kind of trending towards missing heading into that game, but played his most minutes in 3 games, and he was really good. 3 blocks, 5 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists for 20 fantasy points. And back into the rotation he goes. We've seen more of Justin Mullins, not by much, but enough. He went from playing 20 minutes a game to inexplicably getting DMPs. Now he's back to playing 5-6 minutes, but his absence is what allowed Jalen Leach to really soar into this viable DFS option that he is, especially the back half of January where he's played 31, 35, and 39 minutes. He scored 25 or more fantasy points in 5 straight games as well, priced at 6.8. He has been doing a lot of heavy lifting on offense, and he's almost usurped Brooks Barnheiser as the top offensive weapon on the team, at least right now. He projects fairly decent with the minutes that he's been getting, and I almost kind of trust him a little bit more at 6.8. It is a bit of a lean play, admittedly, especially in this spot here against a Wisconsin team that can get after it. But I have my worries with Brooks Barnheiser at the point where, yeah, 9-3 for Barnheiser. It's a really nice play, but I don't think I can any longer trust him as a main team look. And if I want Northwestern exposure, I'm really struggling with Nick Martinelli, who has been good, but inconsistent. Matthew Nicholson, who is sub 5K, but we know he has got foul problems. Ty Berry, who's back to sub 5K, but you guys know the deal on Ty Berry. Delivers a Jordan-like performance one game, then he'll have a bagel the next in 30 minutes. Very inconsistent and uncomfortableness here with this Northwestern team. But I do think somebody is going to come out of here semi-optimal, whether that's Leach, whether that's Ciravino, or if we think that Nicholson can stay out of foul trouble against that Wisconsin front court potentially, or Ty Berry gets hot and hits, I don't know, a million threes like he did against, what was it, the Indiana game, 7 of 10, putting up a 42. We know he can get hot at any time. That price point is just an absolute troll to several in our community who struggle with Ty Berry. Easy fade at 6K, not so much at 4.8. So very interesting game here. And we also know Northwestern, you got to make an account for their overtime modifier. This is a team that since 2012 has played in a ton of overtime games. It was something before the original CBB DFS ban that we made jokes about. And since then, they've been doing it as well. They have been involved in 4 overtime games already this season, 2 in their last 5. So 73-70 projection on Ken Palm tells us this should be a close game overall. Definitely not the DFS flavor of some of the other games on this slate, but exposure can be had nonetheless. I do think Jalen Leach, even though it's an uncomfortable price of 6.8, has a real shot at landing on the optimal for what it's worth. And looking at his rates now, his shot rate is up over 23%, usage rate of 22.7%. He's now making 38% of his triples and looking a lot more confident. His true shooting percentage has risen significantly in conference play. So Leach almost out of nowhere. He only needed, I guess, he's a Fairfield transfer, so he's a pretty decent scorer there too. But I guess he only needed the Justin Mullins modifier there for him to get benched inexplicably to really start taking over. And he's been way more productive over the last 2 weeks of the season than I think most people probably realize. All right, last game on the slate here. We have Kansas State versus Iowa State. Total of 144.5. The Cyclones are favorites of 15.5. This is a tough one here. Kansas State, they biff in great spots, then they inexplicably go nuts in bad spots. So I don't want to completely write them off here. Iowa State is a team that, coming off a pretty deflating loss in the overtime period there against Arizona in a game that they looked like they had. Curtis Jones had the worst shooting performance ever. But looked like they were never really in danger of losing that one, and it looked like at the end especially. And then they got into overtime and they gassed out, and just really a disheartening loss there. So a home game here against a K-State team that they are much better than. They should be able to absolutely dominate, but it's going to take some much better shooting from the likes of a guy like Curtis Jones, who is priced there at 9.4, Josh Jefferson at 9.6, and then Keshawn Gilbert at 9.1. So you have 3 Cyclones players over 9K. None of them will be particularly high owned. I still like Curtis Jones the best of that group. He has a 30.6% shot rate, and he's shooting 38% from long range. Had he shot any kind of well in that Arizona game, he would have put up another 30 plus for sure. He shot 1 of 11 overall, 0 of 8 from the field, still put up about 20 despite shooting horribly. And of course, he was coming off that game against ASU where he dropped to 51. Oh, there's that ASU team again. KJ Lewis, could he have the Curtis Jones game? I think he might. So I do like the idea of going back to Curtis Jones. It's definitely a luxury play, not something that we have to go to. Josh Jefferson at 9.6, his price has come down a little bit. Over 10K was really difficult to get to, but he's been such a huge presence on the inside. The K-State interior, they're a little bit more finesse. I know they got Coleman Hawkins, David and Gasson, but those two both like to play on the perimeter at times. I think Jefferson has his way with them down low, just has to stay out of foul trouble. We did see Deshaun Jackson finally, after a month of really just porous performances. I know he had a decent game against Kansas, but really not on fantasy radars for a long time. Delivered a huge performance against Arizona, one of the few to do so. 10 points, 10 rebounds, 2 blocks, 2 steals, 33.5 fantasy points. He's priced at 4.8. I like his chances of getting a bunch of rebounds just like Jefferson. That 28 minutes was crucial there against Arizona. We've seen his minutes dwindle a lot over the last month of the season, but if we're going to get him closer to the 25 to 26 mark, he's a great play at 4.8. I've been forecasting him for more like 18 to 20, which is where he's been sitting over the last couple of games. But if he's going to be playing that kind of time here, he's one of the better values on the slate. I can't sit here definitively one way or another and say, oh yeah, he's going to play 26 minutes, no problem. So keep that in mind when you're building. If he does, and I had a for sure guarantee on that, he would be a top 2 value on the slate. But I am not so sure of that. But the matchup and DVP is heavily in his favor and Josh Jefferson's favor. And then you have Timmy Lipsy, who's very cheap at 5.8, put up a 30. He hit 3 threes against Arizona. Offense was not there for Curtis Jones or Keyshawn Gilbert, so Lipsy had to stand up. Funny enough, his peripherals kind of he still had them, but they took a hit a little bit to the scoring. It's like you can't put one or the other together. He either gets a ton of peripherals and doesn't score, or he scores a lot and doesn't put a lot of peripherals. But he's cheap at 5.8. So I think Lipsy is a fine play if you want to go there. Probably we'll see a ownership spike as well after last game. And you can see here he projects the best at this moment as well. K-State side, not a lot of excitement there. David Ngason is there at 6'4". He had a really horrible game. He was on the floor just standing around. I was so flabbergasted by seeing how bad he was in the first half against Oklahoma State. I had to find a way to tune into that game. And then it was very obvious what was happening. He was standing around very uninterested, and it cost him a ton of minutes. And they also got they blew the doors off of Oklahoma State, and he just was not interested whatsoever and barely played. So we saw a decent game from Coleman Hawkins. We saw a decent game from the likes of Doug McDaniel, but David Ngason, not so much. He's priced at 6'4". He has an interesting look here against Iowa State, but I think this Iowa State team just absolutely knocks them around. Coming off the Arizona loss, K-State coming off a huge blowout win over Oklahoma State. Coleman Hawkins did drop a 50 in his last game, but look for him to really struggle. And I think fouls are going to be a big factor in this game. I think you see a lot of harassment on the perimeter. So guys like Brendan Housen, who live at the three-point line, he's going to get ran off. A guy like Max Jones, who tends to live at the three-point line, he's going to find life difficult. Overall, I just don't think this Kansas State team warrants too much consideration like the Iowa State side does. And as the de facto hammer game, along with Wisconsin and the Auburn game, the 3, you don't have to feel forced to get exposure to it just for that reason. All right, so that is the slate in the all of its glory. I feel pretty damn good about this slate, honestly. Let's pull up all the teams back here. Give me a minute while I do that, and then we'll get some betting action in here and any prize picks that we like as well. We'll finish up here on this Friday night into now February 1st. We're making it, putting January behind us. I love it. Love it. Love it. I'm actually feeling kind of bittersweet because you just know we're going to blink and it's going to be one shining moment. It's going to be like, where did the season go? Big Selection Sunday show plan for this year. You guys know we've been doing those each and every year for the last 3. Always have special guests there hanging on, announcing the pairings and everything. So we'll have a live watch party for the Selection Sunday once again. Hope that have some more guests on this one. We'll be giving away some prizes as well and other featured items there. But basically just hanging out, doing our thing, talking about those matchups, and really just analyzing them on the spot from a DFS betting and bracket picking perspective. We'll also have a bracket show this year where I pick my bracket live and go through the reasons for why. Last year's bracket show was actually my highest viewed shows of the season. So I guess you guys like that bracket talk there where I drone on about what I think is going to happen. Appreciate that. All right, almost done. Expecting snow, by the way, in the Pacific Northwest. It rained today, and that was like everybody panicking, schools preparing, everybody knowing that it's going to snow. We usually get snow in February up here, and tell you the drivers are already pretty horrible, and when it snows, it's even worse. So, gonna have to go out tomorrow and get everything prepared for Armageddon. That is the snow. All right, let's see what we got here. Grant, remember there'll be some changes, there'll be some edits and things that happen, but it's going to give you a gist of what our system likes for the slate, who we're on, what we're kind of looking at here. So Damian Dunn, KJ Lewis, Tobawaka, those three especially, I am 100% in agreement with the system on. Those guys are way too cheap. Matchups are solid enough. Opportunities are solid enough. Then you get to that second line there, Jaden Taylor, Ben Middlebrooks. Those are they're both very cheap here on the slate, both under 5K, projecting quite high, but we're going to be doing some refinements down on them. Stephen Crowell of Wisconsin, I think he's a little bit over projected there. And then you get into that group of Tamar Bates, who I absolutely love, Ryan Mila, Uga Poplar. Those are some nice options. Chennai Broom, of course, and then Zuby, my man Zuby Ejiofor. But should be a higher scoring slate looking at that. There's just a lot of underpriced options. And there's like a plethora of sub 5K looks. When you add those speculative guys like Jaden Taylor, Ben Middlebrooks, Josen Senin, like there's any combination of those sub 5Ks go off. This is going to be a really high scoring slate. Don't be surprised if it takes 260 plus to take down the 5K, and it might even be more with 1,000 plus people. It might even take a 270, especially if somebody like Damian Dunn drops a 30, Sonnen drops a 35, like all these lower price plays, and then Broom hammers with a 60. So be prepared for that. Mistakes will get punished harder. So the core that I'm going to run with, KJ Lewis as core play number 1. I think Tobe will be the higher owned of the two. Actually, probably going to run both, but KJ Lewis is my preferred and favorite. Damian Dunn, as long as he's starting as core play number 2. And then I would say Janai Broom, but that would just be way too chalky and easy and boring. And we don't like to do that on the show, but know that Broom is going to be a big play for everyone in the industry and us as well. So core play number 3 for me, and I think we can make it fit, is going to be Zuby Ejiofor at 8K, projects just fine. I think he's a great spot against Providence. He will be the one to get those guys like Oswin and Christ Desendako into foul trouble. So very, very high on Zuby. Bonus play and possibly a posh play. I think ordinarily if we didn't have these cheap options to go to and the slate were a little tighter price, Tamar Bates would be much higher owned. But because there's so many options on this 10-game slate, it's kind of spread out. I think Bates sees sub 30% ownership, and that puts him into posh play territory. Very high on Tamar Bates in the spot against Mississippi State. He's going to be the posh play. Bonus 4th member of the core. Posh play meaning sneak play, which and I Broom. All possible. Very solid player pool that you can get to there. So that is where I'm at with my current core. All right. Let's get some bets going. Let's close this. Share this tab instead. What's that, dude? All right. So I like the Missouri plus 6.5 bet here. As much as I like Mississippi State, I think this is one that's like a 1 possession game. I honestly do. So Missouri deserves a little more respect there. So we're going to take the points with Missouri plus 6.5. Arizona minus 6.5. I think that they are easily going to clear that against Arizona State. That tells me that Vegas knows / thinks JQ is going to be playing, at least one of him or Freeman. But I still think Arizona covers that 6.5. I'm going to be opposite of what I'm seeing here with Pittsburgh. I think +2 Pittsburgh is the move. I just don't trust Wake Forest right now. So very hard for me to get behind them. But that would be of the morning set, the 3 games that I feel the most confident in. Let's go down to Mercer. I really like this Mercer team. Considering this one earlier, and I wasn't sure, but Mercer +7 against Chattanooga. The Southern Conference, Chattanooga is like one of the cream of the crop here, but there's some really intriguing teams. Samford, who I think is a tournament team. Wofford, there's some really good clubs here in this one. Mercer, they play at a ridiculously fast pace. They're 11-11. We had them on a slate earlier this year against DePaul. They have several really intriguing players who play this style under Coach Ritter extremely well. Ahmad Robinson for sure. Angel Montas, who is a really fun player to watch as well. Mercer just scores a ton because of the way that they play. Road game against Chattanooga, that's a tough spot. Ken Palm has an 80-73, but I think that Mercer is good enough here to make this a close one. So I'm going to take Mercer +7 on that one, and maybe even sprinkle the money line because this is a Mercer game here. My boys from High Point, who I really want in the tournament against Presbyterian, -9.5. They'll cover that against the Blue Hose. So take that, and then let's go to the night set because there's one game in particular that I like, but I want to see if it changed at all. Here it is. BYU versus UCF. This is a UCF whenever they're on the DFS slate, and that game will be on one of the later slates. You guys know I'm all about my man Key Hall, who continues to the big guard, they're calling him. He continues to nuke, but also teams against them are just absolutely flames. This is one where I do lean into UCF to win, but I'm looking at the total, which is sitting there at 156. I think both of these teams play into the 80s here pretty easily, so I will take that over 156 on BYU UCF. So a total in there at you, if you will. All right. Now, let's go. Prize picks. I have two here, but I want to check because they might have changed the number on me. Oh. Okay, we might not get to. It's not. Oh, there it goes. Lagging on me. There we go. All right. There he is. I couldn't find him. Tamar Bates, over 12.5 points. That is the easiest one of the day for me. I've already talked at length about Tamar Bates. His point props have been pretty damn good most of the season to me. He is a player that I'm very confident hits around 15 to 16 in this spot. He has failed me before, but at 12.5, that's just a really advantageous spot for one of the higher usage guys. And when he gets hot, they feed him. And you saw in the last game when he, stroking. Really like that. That feels about 3 or 4 points too low to me. So over 12.5 points for Tamar Bates. That is my top prop on all of Prize Picks. Also here on my boy KJ Lewis at 10.5 points. That one's not as big of a lock as the Tamar Bates, but I definitely like him in this spot against ASU. So it makes sense when coring him. I got to take his point prop too, right? Double up over 10.5 points for KJ Lewis. Let's see. Under 12.5 points on Marcus Hill against Clemson. Just haven't been impressed with Marcus. Earlier in the year, I liked what he had to offer, but they're starting to play the younger players at his position. The Clemson matchup isn't great for him whatsoever, so we'll lean into the under 12.5 points on that one. And then let's just check what the rebounding number is here for Kashan. They're not even going to give it. Okay, I wanted a rebounding prop on Kashawn Murphy, but they're not giving it. Smart, because they've been getting raked at the over the calls. It had been 4.5, 5.5. If you can find a rebounding prop for Kashawn Murphy on your book or anywhere, obviously PricePick doesn't have it, but 4.5 or 5.5, take the over. Let's see what underdog has it at. Scary. Nobody wants to give me a rebounding prop for Kashawn Murphy. That's a bummer. I'll check again in the morning and see. But I guess the PRA of 19.5 PRA there for him is solid enough. And the points plus reboundings number for Kashawn Murphy at 17.5. I definitely like that too. But again, if you can find a rebounding prop for Kashawn Murphy at 4.5 or 5.5, slam the over. That is a extremely advantageous prop, and clearly they're not even offering it. All right, let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. Stop. All right, there we go. So that just about wraps it up. I think we're good to go there. Tango asked, where are you at in the PNW? So all over the place. What I have family up in North Seattle area, so I was visiting them for a while, and then I lived in wasn't PNW there, but lived in northern Sacramento for a long time, and then been staying up in northern Seattle area for quite a while, taking care of some family stuff. But I bounce around all over between those two states. Never Oregon, because we don't like them. Anyways, I think that'll wrap it up. I appreciate you guys very much. A lot of information, a dearth of it today. Please make sure, if you're going back and watching any on-demand stuff, or feel free to hit me up on any of the social media platforms at WDeuce85. Most active on Twitter and Discord. But please feel free to add any feedback that you have there, or any comments, questions, concerns, anything at all that you have. Fire away. I'll love interacting with the community. Always do so. But we will plan on being back here next Monday, Tuesday, and Friday night for at least 2 more weeks. As we get closer to conference tournament season, we will be going to 4 nights a week and then 5 nights a week after Selection Sunday. Appreciate it very much. Oh, okay, Bellingham. I got some family out there too. My older son goes to the technical school out there. So cool deal. All right. Take care, guys. Be back. New intros we're making too, and some graphics and some all kinds of upgrades to the show. So there'll be some new stuff here, hopefully by Monday. But you know the deal. Let's get those green screens. Let's have those window trips. And man, maybe I'll see you at the DK Sportsbook one of these days, Tango, if you go down to Layla. So yeah, maybe I'll see you there. Anyways, appreciate it, guys. Take care and see you next time. Maybe. There we go.